So I thought I'd come all the way to London to come and meet you because I've been admiring your work for a long time and trying to study as much tattoo history as I can. And you're known for British tattoo history and being someone who runs the Knights of the Round Shader, the tattoo history group. So I really wanted to just come and find out and see if you'd impart your knowledge onto me of your years of British tattoo history.
Well, I can. I don't know it all. There's some other guys in this country. There's a guy called Rambo. He has a tattoo museum in Manchester. He's very, very knowledgeable. He's just produced a great book on a Lancashire tattooist called Dave Heap, and Jimmy Scousey, who is the grandson of Les Scousey, perhaps along with Georgeburchett, the most famous tattooist in Britain. His knowledge is phenomenal of British tattooing. He's published books. He's working on a book now. There's other guys, you know, in Britain that have got great knowledge, and there's a great interest within tattoo history. There's going to be a new book coming out by a guy called Terry Manton. He's Scottish. He was a tattoo artist. He's a signwriter now. His research into the history of tattooing in Britain and Scotland is just absolutely incredible. And when this book comes out, I'm going to tell you, for people with an interest, they've definitely got to get it. Dr. Matt Lodder, he's another great advocate for tattoo history. So there is a huge interest, you know, within tattooing in Britain. Personally, most of my knowledge is from the 70s, 80s, 90s, you know. These other guys go way back. Terry's research goes back, I mean, 16, 17, 1800s. I mean, some of the earliest tattooing ever. But there's loads of people now that we're starting to find about. Some of them are still alive, never ever really sought publicity, but now they're starting to come out. We're starting to find out about them. So that's brilliant, because there's loads of undiscovered stories, and you know, that are waiting to be told. And with podcasts, I mean, you've got Steph Bastian's Tattoo Tales, Jack Watts's Tattoo Traditions. So we're starting to find people now that they're interviewing who, because podcasts didn't exist, they weren't recorded, but it's so easy to do it now. So that's great, you know, people can listen to podcasts, find out great old stories about these guys.
Yeah, it's so important to record these stories, I think, because, you know, unless you do, those stories can get lost with those people, and it's much easier to record something than sort of be writing articles, isn't it?
Well, to be fair, I made a recording with Jock in King's Cross in 1985, and we put it out as an LP record with an audio download. I did it with Atonement Books from Wales, and that was just on a cassette. And I just think to myself, how many people could I have recorded? But sometimes you feel embarrassed to ask them, do you know what I mean? Especially back in the day, and you had your little cassette recorder and that.
Growing up in tattooing, I've heard your name pop up so many times. I was always really inspired by the Borneo style tattooing in my apprenticeship, and I saw the headpiece you did that was quite famous. And you've been tattooing 10 years before I was even born.
Now I feel really old, but no. Looking back at the Borneo piece, you know, a lot of people say that was a piece that really caught their eye. And I've said it numerous times. I was very lucky. I went and met Leo Zulueta in 1982. It was the Queen Mary Tattoo Expo in Long Beach. And he gave me a book of Borneo designs that he'd made. And that was one of the designs that was in there. And 1982, you know, was the second wave of punk, really. And there was a girl I was friends with called Edhardy, and she'd had a few tattoos, and she looked through the book and said, I'd really like that on the side of my head. So she's actually got both sides of her head done, you know, so, but one side was photographed first of all, you know, that was, there was just a group of photographers, Stefan Richter, Chris Robleski. They were doing a lot of tattoo photography, and this image appeared in books, on calendars, on postcards. And you know, nowadays if you see someone with a Mohican haircut and they've got a tattoo on their head, or anyone with a tattoo on their head, you wouldn't give it a second look. But I think at the time, punk was still in its infancy, if you like, even though it was a second wave. The media really picked up on it. Tattooing was nowhere near as popular as it is now. and Adi was a very striking looking person, so it just all came together, and it was very fortunate for me that somebody picked that piece of work, because in a way it kind of put me on the map a little bit in tattooing, you know.
Yeah, I really remember that being really well publicised. I saw pictures of that pop up all over the place, and also the person who apprenticed me, Rabbit Parsons, he used to tell me all about your Dunstable convention. He said that it was just the best and that everyone unusual was there, and that's why it was good. Everyone was fully tattooed and fully punk, and you know, that I feel like the tattoo industry's kind of become it's still that, but it's a bit more diluted because it's more commercial. There's more sort of trendy people in tattooing, and I guess I've got like a nostalgic view just from the stories that Rabbit's told me about, you know, how great conventions were and what Dunstable was. So I'd love to hear about it.
Okay, so prior to Dunstable, there was an organisation called the European Tattoo Artists Association in Britain, and they did little conventions. It was mostly just artists. It was, in inverted commas, a bit of a piss up, really. It was mainly tattooists would bring a few guests with them, and they do mad little things like speed competitions to see how fast a group of tattooists could tattoo an eagle, or, you know, it wasn't taken that seriously. And then Lionel Titchener, who had the Tattoo Club of Great Britain, he's based in Oxford. He published one of the first tattoo magazines, which was called Tattoo International, independently published. He put on conventions. He was trying to get the image of tattooing a little bit uplifted. So they were in different hotels throughout the country. They had them in Ramsgate, Newcastle under Lyme, Derbyshire and that. And a lot of people went to them, but once again, it wasn't really open to the general public. As I said, I went to America in '82. I went to Hanky Panky's convention, which was just insane, being in Holland, Switzerland. I started to travel with a few friends, and we started to feel that there was a need to do a convention that would really go to the masses. After going to Ed Hardy's Long Beach convention, the Tattoo Expo '82, that was just amazing. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it. There were no competitions there, but just this array of artists. I mean, you're talking about Greg Irons, Leo Zulueta, Bob Roberts, the Dutchman, Ed, Candy Everett, Mike Malone, like legendary people, Zeke Owen. So myself and a few other guys, including Mickey Sharps, Ian of Reading, a guy called John Williams, Tony Tiveridge, Rick Mohawk, Brent from Dunstable. We got together and had a meeting and decided we'd look for a venue, and we put on Tattoo Expo '86 at Hammersmith Palais in London. And it was one of those events where we were thinking, is anyone going to turn up? And then on the day there were queues of people. It was just absolutely unbelievable. So we were away with the fairies just thinking, wow, we've got to do this again. And Hammersmith said, oh, we're going to be demolished, which as it goes, it wasn't at that time, but we had to find a new venue. Brent Eggleton, who tattooed in Dunstable, Viking Tattoo Studios, said, look, there's a place called the Queensway Hall. It's owned by the council. It's a purpose-built venue with restaurants, car parking, bars, big stage area, fantastic acoustics, lots of famous people have played there. So we negotiated a deal with the Queensway Hall. I think they thought we were probably just a group of tattooist chancers. It wasn't going to be that good. It blew their minds. They couldn't believe it. They sold out of beer, drinks, food, everything.
Wow.
And by the time we ended up, you know, as Dunstable progressed, we had the Chamber of Commerce on our side, the local police, most of the local council, Hoteliers Association, because Dunstable, you know, is 30, 40 miles outside of London, a little town. Suddenly, for one weekend in the year, everything was packed, every restaurant, pub, hotel, B&B, campsites, people even camping on grass verges. The council were asking us, please tell people, you know, even on the roundabout going into there, people,
Wow.
It was just mad. But there was no internet in those days. You know, we published a magazine called Tattoo Buzz. We sent out posters, flyers, and people travelled from first of all over Britain, then from all over Europe. Then we started to get international people coming. I mean, Horioshi come there, Jack Rudy. You'd go there, and I get people now saying to me, oh, we would really like to recreate Dunstable. But what they don't understand, it's like a child that grows. Okay, so when a child's 1 year old, by the time it gets to 10 years old, it's going to be bigger, but it's not going to be 1 year old again. It's changed, it's developed, its mind's developed. And with Dunstable, I was saying that you saw different types of people start to attend from the first ones when it was just hardcore tattooing. Gradually it changed, you know, you got the public. There was lots of eccentrics that went there. There was one old boy used to always walk around with, I don't know what they were, something attached to his nipples, pushing a shopping trolley. You know, there was a lady there, the most pierced lady in the world. Very little facial tattooing in them days. We went through the periods where people would cut holes in their clothing to show their tattoos off. So, you know, and then you'd get people like Bernie Luther from Austria. I remember somebody said to me, God, have you seen this guy's work? You've got to see this guy's work. Imagine, no Instagram, no MySpace, you know, as it was. It was just you actually there seeing it, you know, because prior to that, the only places that you saw tattooing was if someone came in your studio, occasionally a little article in a magazine, you know, or if somebody sent you photos. I remember when Paul Booth first turned up there, people were just like, wow, have you seen this guy's work? A guy from Southend called Tom Ptolemy. He'd done these big, colourful pixie back pieces. Darren Stairs from Portsmouth, one of the first guys to do big portraits and that. Every Dunstable, there was somebody new there that took people's breath away, if you like. And I look back at photos of Dunstable now, and in my head, I thought it was massive. I thought it was absolutely massive. But in comparison to Tobacco Dock in London, it was nowhere near as big as that, you know, but its impact was massive, you know, and it spawned lots of other conventions. And as we get older, we do look back at things with rose-tinted spectacles, you know, but I do have to say that being involved with all those guys, Tattoo Incorporated, as we called ourselves, I think for me is one of the proudest things that I can say I've been involved in tattooing, because it brought so much happiness to people and it brought tattooing out there. And there were so many little things that people now would take for granted. But I was saying, the LGBT movement, before that, people were, you know, people who were gay had to be careful certain places they went, you know, and that's a fact. But at Dunstable, they were welcomed, and then they started to come out, be quite flamboyant, and it was great, you know, and you'd see all these guys and they'd be in their bar, and then a group of other guys again, and everyone was interacting, and it was a great place for people to get together from all different walks of life. And it was quite funny. There was a couple used to go there. They sort of like, the guy had a big Mohican. They always looked amazing, these two people. And I was up in Hexham in Northumberland the other week and bumped into them. Wow. And they still look great. And we were just talking about how Dunstable used to be. You know, it left a lasting impression for a lot of people. And whilst there's been other conventions that have come along that have surpassed it and, you know, been much bigger than that, Dunstable was a little seed that germinated and, you know, turned into something really special.
It sounds like it inspired a lot of people, and especially if it's that safe space for people to be able to connect and express themselves and share, you know, images on their bodies, then that's a really unique space at that time to have created. And I know from Rabbit, it's something people are still talking about because it had that big vibe. It really made impact and change, and you know.
It's interesting, I think, for all of us, whatever we're into, be it music, fashion, art, tattooing, there'll always be a golden era, you know. And for me, my golden era that I enjoyed the most was the 1980s. And, you know, I look back at that with great fondness. So I think Dunstable, for a lot of people, that was their golden era, you know. And they probably look back, and if you were to be able to go back there, there's probably a lot of people that were, you know, if you were to take people from today back there, they go, what's all this about? Because everything that was unusual then is normalised now, you know, so that's quite interesting, you know. I went to the Paradiso in Amsterdam for Hanky Panky's birthday a few years ago, and it's all been done up, and I walked in there and I thought, God, this place is really small. But once again, when Amsterdam Convention was in its heyday with like Ed Hardy there, Horioshi, all these people, I think you're just in such a whirlwind. You know, I definitely wasn't stoned because I don't smoke dope, you know, so I was in Amsterdam, but I was straight. But I think it's just such a whirlwind that you're seeing things, that your mind is filled, so everything, each time you walk around you're seeing things, you're not looking at the constraints of walls, you're looking at everything that's happening. So yeah, that was another great convention, Amsterdam.
Yeah, I think those spaces are a great place to get your inspiration from as well, because like you say, you're seeing it all at once, aren't you? And at the time there wasn't internet to be able to look at other styles of tattooing and what other people are up to, so you had to get together in these events to sort of see what was happening in other countries, other places, and get influence.
What's really mad about those times is, I mean, there were no mobile phones, so people had like either an Instamatic camera, which was no good to take a photo with, or an SLR. So loads of people would take photos of the tattoos and go home and study them, because that's the way that you did it. And I'm sure that this will resonate with a lot of people now. Instagram is a great tool, a great app. But if we're really honest, there is so much visual information on there, so many people on it. How many tattoo artists do you look at their work and you think that's really nice, and you look through 20 pictures and you think, oh fuck this, I'm not looking for any more. You're moving on to the next thing. We're spoilt with how much stuff is there now. And that's why sometimes people, if somebody finds a little old photo, a really antique photo, that there's a greater interest in that than some, you know, work that's been beautifully executed now, and from someone whose portfolio is just magnificent. You know, you look at that one little old photo and you're thinking, I saw a guy sent me a copy of a picture. A lady had gone into his shop and said, I don't know if you'd like this, it might be of interest to you. So it was a picture of a soldier, and he had like a pith helmet on and a white uniform, a leopard skin in front of him. It was like a cabinet card. And on the bottom, it was, you could see it had been taken in India. It had the photographer's name. But in the next photo, the guy had a complete back piece, you know, this old back piece. And then with it was a letter that said that he died. It was from his commanding officer to say that he'd been died in combat. And anyway, I looked it up, found out who the guy was. And he was a guy who came from Guildford and had been tattooed, died in the First World War. But just looking at that picture, to me, it was like, wow, look, he was a soldier, he died in combat. I wonder where he got this done. You know, Guildford, you can go straight to Waterloo. Would it have been Burchett who did it, or Sutherland MacDonald? Did he have it in India? I think all these unanswered questions, you know, just personally, I find that stuff more interesting. I can appreciate how much beautiful art is there now, but there's, you know, I mean, how many people are there doing great work in every genre? Hundreds and hundreds. I mean, I'm going to tell you now, a guy said to me, there's what's called an armorial plate, like it's a military badge, and it said on it, Captain Kilbride, tattoo artist. He said it's in an auction. So I Googled it, nothing came out about Captain Kilbride. I looked at it, and on this auction house it said, you know, this is genuine. Anyway, I bid on it and I won it. So it started off this really interesting voyage to try and find out who Captain Kilbride was. So I got in touch with Jimmy Scousy, Rambo, some other people from Knights of the Round Shader, and they said, oh, you know, there was a Professor Joseph Kilbride. He'd been married to 2 fully tattooed ladies, travelled all around the world tattooing. Anyway, through Terry Manton from Scottish Tattoo History, we found out that actually Professor Kilbride at one point was in Hull teaching people how to skip a boat and called himself Captain Kilbride, which kind of, we think that's where this has come from. But when you read his story, Kilbride's story, it's so interesting. And that's what I'm saying, just through somebody tipping me off. And what was interesting, going back to it, I actually found out, I got in touch with the auction house, they wouldn't tell me who was selling it. But then researching it further, it was on eBay at one time, and I got in touch with the seller, and she said, I got it at a car boot sale in Derby, and 18 people had bid on it on eBay, and it had gone for like 50 quid, and then it ended up in this auction And I just thought, wow, it's mad. I wonder who bought it, why they didn't hang on to it. How did it, you know, with Kilbride, where he'd been, how did it end up in Derby? You know, it's just really weird, this whole little thing. And, you know, somebody got in touch with me and they were just like, they wanted to buy it off me, made a really, really good offer. And it was like, you know, I don't really want to sell it. I don't need the money. I actually like the fact it's got this history to it, you know, and yeah, so that was a great little, just out the blue that came along, you know.
That's it, we are spoilt for choice these days. Obviously it used to be like 1 or 2 tattooers per town, whereas now we're saying there's 1 or 2 per street. But you know, I think it's great, like you say, Instagram's a great tool. Things like Pinterest are great for people to get a bit of a mood board for what they want tattooed together.
Yeah.
But it's also created this kind of social media trend and people being able to just scroll through, and, you know, even a good tattoo, you can just scroll past it now, can't you?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like being spoilt for choice almost, isn't it? But I think it's good for people to know what tattooing was, because then you understand it as well.
For myself, you know, I mean, I can't even hold a candle to half the tattooists that are out there now, but one of the things that I find quite interesting is in my career, I kind of get a great interest in things and then try to want to sort of get into that. By that I mean you try and reinvent yourself, if you like, you know. That's one, you know, Dot Shaw, she passed away recently. She used to tattoo under the name of Dorothy Hayward. She tattooed in Blackpool 1958 till 1972. And she was rediscovered by a guy called Terry Manton, who runs this unbelievable site called Scottish Tattoo History. He does amazing research. And I was just fascinated that this woman, she worked with the first black tattoo artist in Britain, Prince Eugene Lawrence in Blackpool. And it was really interesting reading about, you know, how he dealt with prejudice at that time, her being a female as well. Things that, you know, I mean, we still see prejudices going on with things, but going back to 1958 would have been really difficult. And just reading the letters she sent me and talking to her on the phone, and the fact that they only used 2 colours, black and red, and occasionally green. And I looked at these little pictures she's done, and the aesthetics of them were just unbelievable. And I said, you know, would you mind if I did some of your designs? She started to redraw everything. And she was like, no, go for it, you know. So I would do these things, credit her on it. And she loved it, you know. And then other people started to do them. But it's just weird that for all the traditional tattoo designs we see and how much there, suddenly, just out the blue, somebody's rediscovered, and the fact that they were only using 2 colours and how great it looked. You know, I was really sad that she passed away, because I was due to go and see her with some other people, and then COVID came along and we got locked down, and she was elderly anyway. And it's just like, you know, the last 2 years, God, they've caused so many problems, haven't they, for people.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, people in general and the tattoo industry, obviously we've all had our shop shut over and over again, so it would be great to be amongst tattooers again at the conventions, that's for sure. Yeah,
I mean, we put on a little do, Ginger Phil, who runs Northgate Tattoo in Bath. He's a good character, and he puts on the Bristol Tattoo Show. We put on a little event called Tattoo Flashback, which was where people could go and trade and buy old tattooing stuff, you know, of interest. And it was just a one-day event, but it was amazing. People went there, and it was the first time people had got together since that. And the feeling, it was a little bit like an old convention, you know, because it was just in quite a small function room, and there was a little bar there, and people sat around talking and that. It was just great, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to going Brighton convention and catch up with everyone, you know.
Brilliant. Yeah, we'll be tattooing there as well, myself and my co-worker, so
cool.
Come say hi, we'll have a beer.
Yeah,
I wanted to ask you as well, because I think one of the reasons why it's really good to pay attention to, you know, the generational differences in tattooing is obviously the differences with the kit. And I think the new generation, you can just catalogue order anything you want, and there's a product for everything. And some of them you think you don't even need that, you could just be using Dettol and whatever, you know, there's so many products now. But what I was trying to communicate to like my apprentice is the reason why I respect the older generations of tattooists so much is because they had to make absolutely everything. Needle bars, mix the ink, solder things, the cables, frames, wrapping coils. You know, people don't know about this stuff in the new generation, so I wanted to chat about how it was like in your apprenticeship.
Well,
and how
when we look at the availability of equipment today and that you can just order everything, looking back, it's quite funny because I didn't do an apprenticeship, I was self-taught, and for that reason probably made loads and loads of mistakes, but that's the way it was back then. And it was quite funny because some suppliers didn't want to sell to you if you weren't a tattoo artist, you know, which when you think about free trade and that seems quite weird. It was an adventure trying to find out where you got stuff from. But there's always, or for years and years, there's been stuff readily available. Like I've never made well, I have put machines together, but I'd never made a machine. And I've got a guy who's just come to work here with me who makes machines. And the other week I went and wound some coils. It's the first time I've ever done it. And I've just thought, you know what? I mean, I've mixed colours, I've made needles, I've cut springs and that, and it was like really good fun. Not as easy as I thought the way we did it, but there is a big group of people within tattooing now that are willing to learn. I mean, I've done needle making days here with just people that are interested. We've done stencil cutting. I mean, to be honest with you, I'd never want to use an acetate stencil. But it's good to sit there and make it. And a couple of the guys used them and they sent pictures of the tattoos they did. And we do that. We did a prison tattoo making day where we were making just prison style machines. And every now and then we'll do like a paint day or just get together, a few of us. And I really enjoy that aspect of tattooing. The equipment now, there is just so much. And I'm one of those people that I love to try everything new. But the other week, you've seen how big my shop is. It's like, you know, I mean, there's 7 or 8 rooms we've got here. I consolidated everything into one room and I just said, look, what have we got? We had boxes and boxes of needles that, I don't know, have been sent to me or given to me, configurations no one's ever going to use. You can't even give them away. Bottles and bottles of colour, and I know there's this big thing now with the EU and with REACH and that, but in the end I just thought I need to go back to the old days where you had less stuff, you utilised everything you had, and you know, sometimes necessity was the mother of invention, and you did have to like think, oh, how am I going to do that, what am I going to make this out of, you know. I mean, I've had a couple of people that have worked here who, when machines have gone wrong, were like, I'm going to have to buy a new machine. And it's like, well, you don't, because the spring's broken, we can fix it. But that doesn't always come with apprenticeships now, does it, you know? But the thing about tattooing at the moment is there's this big argument going on with loyal to the coil. And dildo pens and rotaries, and yeah. I just think it's a bit nonsense really. I don't think it matters what you use, providing you turn out something that your customer really likes, because ultimately you want to create something that when that person walks away with it, they like it, they enjoy it, you know, they like the piece they've got on them. I use everything, coils, wands, rotaries, you know, it's just fun. I mean, one of the things I've had, not arguments, I try not to argue with people, but I've had some old timers just go to me, oh, you know, what's the matter with you? We just use coils. And it's like, why? Because they work. And it's like, yeah, but I bet at your house you ain't got a black and white TV. I bet you've got the latest flat screen one. I bet you've got aircon in your car. I bet you've got a sat nav. In fact, I bet you've got a mobile phone. You ain't got a landline with a big cord that you walk out your house. It's like, why in your life away from tattooing would you want to use things that are progressive, and yet within tattooing you don't want to even acknowledge that there might be something that could make your job easier? And even if it doesn't, if it makes somebody else's easier, don't criticise them for it. I mean, not having to use a clip cord is great. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think having a lighter equipment's really ergonomic as well, you know, for the lifetime of your hands and back tattooing if you can take some of the weight out. I think that's a really great thing.
Well, I think I've been really fortunate. You know, I've been tattooing for over 40 years and used everything from coil machines that weigh the same as a 10-kilogram barbell and that, right? But apart from a few times a little bit of back problems, I've been fine with it. I think it's really sad when I meet young people that are saying they've got carpal tunnel or they've got problems with their hands and that with their backs. It really does pay to look at this business, to think if you want to be in it for the long journey, you've got to look after yourself, you know. And that's just from an old timer, you know. I mean, I still go and train at the gym and, you know, try and stay a bit fit, try and stay active mentally as well. That's one of the things, you know. Customers certainly keep your mind active.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's memes about the tattooist posture. I saw one where the tattooer's upright and it says, I've got 40 years left in my back, I best look after it. And then it said by the end of the day, they're like this, and it goes, this line's going to be crispier than fried chicken. Like, and that's all of us by the end of the day. I start like this. And
that is actually one of the important things is now, though, is, you know, to make sure that you've got a chair that rotates 360, that goes up and down, and for your customer's chair. I mean, there's great tattoo furniture now. I mean, when you look at the old boys, Cash Cooper used to just work off of a wooden chair like that in a tiny little space, and you think, you know, that's the constraints they had to work in a lot of them places, you know.
Yeah, I've got some vintage photographs taken by Michael and Kate back in New York, and they're of Huckspalding and Tom DeVita and people like that, and they're just, you know, stretched over a chair in the middle of the room getting tattooed. It's not like, you know, this fancy equipment today, is it?
When I first started, I was just working out my kitchen, and I remember I had this big long padded wooden board that you just lay onto 2 kitchen chairs to make a bench. Just seems mad now, you know.
Yeah.
Seems mad that you tattoo in your kitchen, but back then that's the way it was, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that, you know, the scene of tattooing looked quite different in Brighton now. There's, you know, hundreds of tattoo shops, and I heard before it was only one guy tattooing on the pier, but you said you've got a lot of family in Brighton. I'd love to know what London and Brighton look like in the eras of tattooing where I've not been around.
Well, to be honest with you, my family are half English, half Irish, and my dad's side of the family were from Ireland, and they lived up this way and then moved to Brighton. And you know, I've got loads of family down there. When I was a kid, I used to go to Brighton, just take the train, you know, on my own, get the bus to Moscow, and then just spend my school holidays just going around the lanes. It was different, and it was all little junky shops, you know, not junky, junk shops, antique shops, bric-a-brac. And then I had an uncle who'd been in the Navy, and as I got a little bit older, I saw that he'd got this tattoo done, and it said, Mary, my wild Irish rose, with a rose on it. And I said, I just started getting tattoos then, and I said, Fred, where'd you get that? And he said to me, I'll come out the station, walk down the road a bit, there's some metal sort of barrier things, and then there's this little shop you go in the basement. Anyway, I went and found it, and I think it's North Road it was on. It's still there, the actual building, but it's not a tattoo shop. But there was just a door with a sign that said Tattooist. And I let myself through there, went down a metal spiral staircase, and there was a guy just sat in this dingy little room. I think he had some kind of small, maybe gas stove with saucepans with holes drilled in the lids with a machine stood in there. And I can remember it smelt of damp in there. And I didn't have a camera at the time. I just so wish I did, because I just remember there was a big picture of the crucifixion, and at the bottom was some roses. And when I looked, that rose that was on there was the one my uncle had done. Anyway, I said to this guy, I got 2 tattoos done. I got a clipper ship with 2 palm trees, and I got a devil woman. And mate, they were bleeding 2 days later, and I looked at them and I thought, oh God, they're not really that good. I kept looking in the mirror thinking, wishing they would be better, because they were just fucking chucked on, you know. And then on the Lewis Road, going towards Moscow, there used to be a military barracks there, and there was another studio there that had all photos in the window. And shortly after that, Danny Fuller, who had Blue Dragon, him and his brother Steve actually were tattooing in a place in Duke Street Market, and I'd become friends with them. There was a guy called Gary White who tattooed on the pier. There was a couple of different places that had been on the pier. And then, like everything over the years, more and more shops opened. I think there was the Wizard Ink down there. Yeah, just various ones that I'd see. And now there's absolutely loads of them, but some really fantastic ones, you know, I have to say that. But it's a bit like looking at a black and white photo from when I went there, you know. It was just a couple of little old shops and that.
Nice. Yeah, I wondered what it was like actually doing a tattoo with an acetate stencil, a needle you've made yourself, inks you've mixed yourself. You know, what did it feel like compared to these days? Did it feel...
It doesn't feel as good as having ready-made colours, ready-made needles and a stencil machine. I only ever did a couple of tattoos with acetate. I mean, I think it's a massively skillful thing for people to do that. There's a video of Huckspalding doing a Battle Royal back piece using an acetate stencil. It's just like, how on earth did you do that? So I tended to use hectographic paper and tracing paper, not the stuff that we use in the stencil machines now. It's a little bit thicker and you could use the stencils over and over again. With making your own needles, it was sometimes like you'd make a needle that was like a needle going through a knife through hot butter that just put on brilliant lines. Other times you'd be like, what? Why ain't this working? Or when you were making your needles, if you picked the packet up and suddenly they all flew over the floor, it was like, oh no, there's 1,000 needles I've got to solder. And you used to get the flux going up your nose when you were making them. It was kind of time consuming as well, but if you made them properly, they were good. And of course, we used them over and over again. We sterilised them, you know. And a lot of the old timers, I can remember an old friend of mine telling me that he went to Bill Scousey's tattoo studio in Aldershot, and Bill was tattooing him and talking to him, and he went like that, and he banged the needle on the bench, and he went, oh, fuck it. He said, I've been using that for nearly a year. It's been great. It's really aged. And tattooists used to think that when you use your needle, and really, although people might think now, well, it sounds a bit primitive, there's no reason why with ready-made needles on the needle bar, if they're cleaned in an ultrasonic and put through an autoclave, you can't use them again. But we've been put into a disposable society, you know. And the truth is, if tomorrow the tattoo world was told, actually, there's a huge shortage of needles, in fact, we don't think we're going to be able to get you any, they'd all be getting autoclaves and sterilising them, 100%.
Yeah, I've seen that, you know, with the tattoo community, obviously people getting together, being able to share ideas and, you know, different art styles from around the world. Obviously, with conventions, that's changed a lot too. Flights, you know, before the pandemic were quite cheap and people all travelling to Europe regularly for conventions and things like that. But I was wondering about in the days of Dunstable, what it was like getting influences from other places and other artists visit as well.
If you look at a lot of the Japanese tattooing being done now by non-Japanese tattoo artists, they've researched it and it's fantastic, you know. If you look at a lot of the stuff from the 1980s, it was a kind of Western interpretation, and the same with tribal work and that, you know. So I think now there's a lot of stuff that's much truer to its roots and its origins than it was then. But I can remember, I mean, some tattooists, when they were talking about doing Japanese work, if you had lots of Western tattoos, they'd colour black up to the edges of them, or do a red or a yellow outline around the existing tattoo and then black it in and do a sleeve and call it Japanese. I've got like a huge collection of photos and stuff from back in them days. When you look at wim bars and you look how wim bars are done now, they were just like black elongated shapes, you know, around the tattoo. So I think that nowadays it's much more, as I said, true to the original, but back then you were just trying to create how you thought it should be, you know?
Yeah, I guess it's so much easier to access those references because with the internet, Google searching images as opposed to walking to the library and finding an encyclopedia to look up a certain bird or things like that. It's probably much easier to reference.
I mean, it was so hard to find reference stuff. I mean, loads of tattoo artists years ago used to keep scrapbooks. They keep two types of scrapbooks. One would be little articles on tattooing, which now you can buy books, magazines. I mean, at one time next door, the little newsagent just next door, I took a photo. The top shelf that would have been girly magazines, you know, 10 years prior to that, there was about 16 different titles of tattoo magazines available then. I mean, now there's only Total Tattoo in this country, so the magazine industry's changed within tattooing, but the scrapbooks that they kept, one would be, as I said, little newspaper clippings, articles, you know, Rivali, tidbits, news of the world. If you saw anything, you cut it out, stick it in there. That would be almost like your historical or written reference. But people would also find pictures anywhere, whether it be bubblegum cards, children's illustrations, adverts with an illustration on it. I've still got scrapbooks. I could show you them in the other room, just of where I've looked through and maybe seen a little advert which has got a fox's head on it or a tiger's head, and you're thinking, oh, that would work exactly as a tattoo. So you'd cut that out, stick that in there, you know, and then in the end you draw it, put it onto a sheet of designs, you know, and then put your name on. And then we'll go, wow, he does great designs. And really, it's just plagiarism. The same as it is with artists now that are doing absolutely unbelievable work, but actually taking all their reference from a photographer's work and giving them zero, you know, appreciation for it, you know. And we've seen, haven't we, now with copyrights and that, photographers are starting to, I think Kat Von D had a case, didn't she, where she did a tattoo of some, was it Miles Davis or someone, and the photographer said that he felt that he owned the rights to it. So, interesting.
Yeah, that's different. Yeah, so I travelled to Easter Island in 2020 to research the tattooed moai. So I'd found these archaeological archives of the moai's bodies, so not just, you know, up to their necks, they've got full bodies underground. And I found that they've got tattooed back pieces and things like that. So I wrote an article about that because I think it's really important that we know who came from where, and if we can read that from the tattooing, I think these stories are really important to preserve. So I wrote an article for the magazine and then felt really honoured to be on the cover with Lal Hardy. And yeah, I got your compliment about that article, so I just wanted to come and meet you and chat tattoo history.
But it was really interesting because as a young person, as a young child, where we were saying about there wasn't the internet, didn't exist, you know, many things that you looked at were in encyclopedias or in wonders of the world. And are there any, you know, I call them statues, are there any statues more famous than Easter Island or more striking? And, you know, different ways they'd shoot the pictures of them, normally in black and white. I think as a kid that captured your imagination. I mean, I don't know what it's like for kids now, who knows what captures their imagination, but when I was a kid, my granddad loved pirate films, so the Seven Seas and seeing galleons and seeing my uncles who'd been in the Navy with the sailing ships tattooed on them. Although they didn't go on sailing ships, they would have been on warships. In a child's mind, you're like thinking, wow, they're on these riggers going there, and you're going, you know, mutiny on the Bounty, going to Tahiti. It's just, I've always wanted to go to Easter Island, you know, and as I said, you know, I've travelled to quite a few places. So when I saw your article, I thought it was really interesting, and interesting that you were on a boat, and what you told me earlier on about how that came about is fascinating, you know, to know that there's still a voyage of discovery out there to be had. But, you know, I didn't realise until you said that they'd excavated them down, because that came out a few years ago, so they must have re-excavated down, you know. But it's just amazing, isn't it, to think that those were created back then, like Stonehenge, all these different things, the pyramids. In fact, last night I was listening to a podcast about pyramids around the world. So, as I say, as a kid, all those, what you would call wonders of the world, was something that captured the imagination. So I'm a little bit jealous that you've been to see them, but maybe one day I'll get there.
Yeah, Yeah, they're definitely worth visiting, and you can still see the tattooed markings on the sculptures in Anakenna. So it's one of the bays they're more tattooed on.
Okay.
And I actually visited the volcano in Easter Island too, and you can see the stone heads half carved out of the edge of the volcano. So they'd take all the stone and walk it to its position, but there's some half in the rock still.
Wow.
And I actually saw one of the Easter Island heads there has a big ship carved into its chest, and
Really?
you think, who sailed there and whose ship? And you know, so far back, isn't it? There's a lot of mystery around these things.
Oh mate, there's so much mystery in this world that, you know, and even with tattooing, you know, when they find like the Ice Maiden and Otzi and that, I mean, how, because of the nature of human skin and decomposition and that, I mean, who knows what tribes existed that we'll never know if they were marked, or what people were branded for whatever reason, be it being put into slavery, criminality, warlike things. We'll never know, you know, so it's just, yeah, it's fascinating.
And I can see you've had a great experience travelling the world as a tattooer as well.
One of the things that I think is quite interesting is I was in, I think it was Santa Barbara. We were just walking along and there were a group of Hispanic type guys. This is in the early 1980s. And it, you know, it looked like, oh God, there's this gang of guys. There was myself, a tattoo artist called Dennis Cockle, and an old guy called Ray Mellor. Ray Mellor was a really interesting old boy. He loved tattooing. He kept it away from his family. I don't think they really knew. And he told me that he always used to look through the window of Georgeburchett's shop. And he had a back piece. He got tattooed by Ed Hardy and that. So he had a few tattoos. We used to keep them covered, but it was hot. We were walking along. This group of blokes were walking towards us. And suddenly they saw Ray. And they went, hey, look, that old dude's tattooed. Now you see old men with tattoos, you wouldn't even think about it, but Ray was old. And I said, hey guys, love your tattoos. I had a camera in me. I said, can I get a photo of you guys? And next thing, they're all posing. And they were like, you got to come and meet our brother. He's a tattoo artist. So the same as in when we were in Tahiti, these guys were sort of, they kept looking over at us with my mate Naresh Bahani. He's an Anglo-Indian tattooist. But he did look a bit Polynesian, I guess. So we just went up to these guys and said, oh, we love your tattoos. Next thing, they're all wanting photos done. And one of the nicest things was we went over to Moorea. We heard there was a place called Tiki Village. So we just jumped on a ferry, no plans. We didn't know where it was. So we went from Papiti Dock, got there. We were just asking, you know, do you know where this place is? The guy said, oh, it's a real long way. And we'd been talking to these people on a coach, on the boat, these German people who wanted tattoo photos with us. They weren't tattooed, they were like a little bit posh. And the guy said, that coach is going, why don't you ask if you can go with them? So we just asked them and they said, no. I thought, okay, fine. And there was a guy with a Land Rover, open back Land Rover, and he said, listen, I'll take you there, but I have to deliver this fruit to these hotels on the way. So we loaded it up with him. He couldn't believe that we just jumped in and helped him. And anyway, we were driving down this little road in the middle of nowhere, and this car came up behind us and it was flashing its lights. And the guy stopped and I said to Naresh, well, what's going on here, you know? And the guy said, oh, do you want to go in that car? Because it looks like it's going to rain. That's how kind the people were. Anyway, we get to Tiki Village. There were these guys out there looking really fed up. And we said to him, hey, your tattoos are great. And I'd had some little badges made of the great Omi and that. And I said, hey, would you like some of these badges? And can we photograph your tattoos? Next thing, they wanted to be photographed with us. And it was just like a kind of a tattoo brotherhood, if you like. And we were explaining to him, we pointed to the German people. And we said, you know, they didn't want to let us on the coach, but we've got here, this guy bought us. And they were just like, come with us. They took us to meet the tattooists that were in there. They got us drinks, food, then they got this little guy, I remember he had his face tattooed, he had a little van thing. They said, go with him. They took us to all the tattooists on the island to visit them, and it was totally amazing, you know. And so it kind of did make a little, I just think that in a lot of respects, tattooing has made us bond to other people and to meet them and to not be feared of them, do you know what I mean? It's like a link. So I've really enjoyed that on my travels, you know.
Yeah, it's great being able to sort of find common ground with people anywhere if you're tattooed. Everyone's got a story, or you know, it's a great exchange when you travel, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I went to, just before the lockdown, we went over to Japan, and I met up with some tattooists from Australia I'm friends with, my mate from Bolton come, Naresh again, and I went and got tattooed by this guy called Hori Ken. I can remember lying on the floor, he was tattooing my ribs, he did everything by hand, even the outline. Everything was a new experience there. When he put the stencil on, he put a heat lamp on to dry it, but he painted something onto my skin first to make the stencil be applied. And I just remember I was lying there, and you know, anyone who's had Tebori done, it sounds like someone eating. I was just lying there, the other guys, you could hear them in the background, but I just zoned out. He had a little radio on, I don't know what the Japanese guy was saying on it. The floor was warm, it's in this tiny little thing. I was just lying there, and it's just like, wow, this is fantastic, you know. Same as when I got tattooed in Borneo, I was just lying down. It was a really hot, sweltering night, and outside was almost like a monsoon, you know. And there was a little fan creaking around, and just, you know, those things. In Tahiti, I got tattooed on. It was like lying on this sort of mat on the beach, looking out at the ocean. And Keone Nunes, you know, from Hawaii, he was doing some hand taps for me. And one of the things that I've said it quite a few times, there was a book came out called Skin Deep by Scott and Gotch. It was two naval men that had put this book together. Most of the stuff in it is on sailors, but there is the history of tattooing. And within it, it talks about Tahiti, Japan, Borneo, Samoa. And as a young kid, I looked at this book and I was just thinking, oh my God, look at them places. Because then going to Mallorca was exotic. You know, really, most holidays were spent in this country. And I've actually I haven't been to Samoa, but all the other countries in there I've been to. It's just absolutely fascinating. And to go and meet people, especially people that are doing the hand tattooing, I've really enjoyed that. You know, I've got quite a lot of different hand styles done on me. Yeah, it's just been, you know, it's just been a dream come true, really.
Yeah, the hand styles are amazing experience. It's really like, I found it quite tranquil when I was getting tattooed with the hand tapping. I think because it's rhythmical, because you're laying down on the mats like that, it's got an atmosphere to it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went to India a couple of years ago, only to Goa, but my friend who's travelled in India extensively and got good connections out there, we went to see some of the street artists, you know, that just set up, and that hygiene's non-existent with them. They charge by the inch for the tattoos. They work at the bus stations, the railway stations. We went to this mad sort of fun fair, gigantic fun fair place. It was just huge. And, you know, we bought some machines off the guys, these old machines. It was just, I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was so mad. And I was hoping that we'd be able to get these machines. I knew that they wouldn't be, you know, the cleanest machines. So I'd taken plastic bags with me, taken rubber gloves, and taken, you know, isopropyl swabs and that to clean them all, and boxes to bring them back in. And we had a guide with us. Anyway, we started to try and negotiate with this tattooist, and it was on a bridge. And then this big fun fair was there, and they were like 20 quid the machine, but the guide was going, no, my friend, it's too much. I was going, just give him the money, will you? More and more people started to turn up to see what was happening. They blocked the whole road. The cars couldn't get past and everything. And I was just like, just give him the money. Let's just put the machines in the bag. And we drove back to the hotel, and then I got the rubber gloves on, cleaned them up as best we could. I've got some great photos of before and after. And I put some pictures of them up, and people go, no, I can't believe that you'd even have bought them. And it's like, for fuck's sake, you're in tattooing. This is like part of tattoo history. It's not all, you know, the best equipment in the world. These are people in a poor country that have made their own machines that are trying to make a living.
That's why I think it's so important to appreciate the skill in, you know, making the kit to even be able to do the tattoos, as well as being a good tattooer.
I mean, so, you know, some of the old boys and their skill levels, and there's, you know what, you know, listen, I'm one of those people, I'm quite comfortable talking and that. So I guess people ask you to be a little bit of a spokesman in some respects, but I'm telling you now, there's so many tattooists I know that keep their own counsel, that are just unbelievable in their knowledge of manufacturing machines, making stuff, and also in the history of tattooing. You know, there's so many of them out there, but maybe they don't feel comfortable in the limelight. You know, there's things in tattooing's past that now you can't even speak out about them or show them, even if it was to say that what I'm showing you I don't agree with, it's wrong, because social media just creates people that just want to shout people down and go mad. And instead of people having sensible debate or accepting that something is historical, prime example, right? In my shop, I don't do any swastikas of any sort whatsoever, right? And maybe that's because in the 1980s there were some very dubious groups and things that, you know, you didn't want to be associated with, or you don't want to do that. I run a site called Knights of the Round Shader on Facebook, a tattoo history page, and there was a British Pathé News film reel recently released of Bruno in Paris, and within this black and white from the 1960s film reel, they were showing you his shop and tattoos, and it showed you some of a swastika, but he was going to cover that up. Facebook said to me that I was promoting hate groups. I had to, it had been removed, this post, because I guess the AI or bots look through for things like that. And I know that with mad political groups and things, there's probably stuff they don't want on there. But that was just a little example of, you couldn't show that even though he was doing a cover up, because the initial picture was picked up. And, you know, some of the stories about old timers should really be told to show how much the attitudes of tattooing have changed. I mean, there was so much misogyny with the old timers, you know. And one of the things is, I put a thing up on my Instagram the other week about these old boys at a meeting had said that no women should be allowed in tattooing. And I wrote on there, and it was in 1982, because that's when I'd been to America and I'd met all these fantastic female tattoo artists, and I listed them all and just said, for any of you guys who think that women haven't got a place in tattooing, you're sadly mistaken. You should look at what they're doing. And really, if you look at tattooing now, women's role in tattooing is absolutely huge. And I think that we have to say, you know, that Kat Von D played a major part in that. And there's loads of people who want to slag Kat off and that, but you know, I met her right at the beginning. She's worked here. She actually tattooed in this room that we're sat in. You know, listen, she did for female tattooing an amazing thing, you know. And now there's so many female tattooists that have just like made their own mark in the business. It's incredible, you know. I've had loads and loads of different women that have worked here over the years from all different countries. People that some people don't even know about. Miss Roxy, she was a tattooist from Denmark. She worked in Hawaii too. Man, her tattooing was so fantastic. She was so advanced in what she was doing. To see what she did was incredible. She tattooed, she was mad on Salvador Dali. She done the bust of Voltaire on Mickey Sharp's in here. I looked at it, I'd never seen anything like it, you know, just incredible. And she said to me something, and she tattooed a toucan on my leg. I used to be mad on toucans. And I was a little bit in awe of her, and she said, you know, I use your machines, I haven't got any machines. And I thought, well, I wonder if they're good enough for her, you know. You're talking about in the 1980s now. And I said, I've only got these machines. And she went, a tattooist can work with anything. And she just did this on me. It was wicked.
Brilliant. That's amazing. Yeah, tattooing does seem a lot more like diverse and inclusive. I heard that it wasn't a place for women so much now, but now I see you've got a female tattoo apprentice, and now when you walk around the tattoo conventions, sometimes you see a majority of women rather than a minority, and I think that's brilliant. It's really great to see everyone celebrating the art form together.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I actually think that in some respects, perhaps sometimes like females being tattooed feel more comfortable being tattooed by another female. You know, it's like, I won't say what the old timers would have said, oh, they can all talk about their nails. And, but no, seriously, it's, we have a mixture. Listen, I've got people who work here from the LGBT community, you know, I've got guys who work here, I work here, old timer, you know, I've got young apprentice, female apprentice, you know, listen, we tattoo people from all walks of life in here. I'm in London, you know, one of the most diverse cities in Europe. So we tattoo people of all colours, all ethnicities, you know. It's just a place to come in. It's a tattoo shop. And it's old-time tattooists once said to me, all we do is put pictures on people, which is true, but sometimes there's a story and there's an emotion that goes with that. And sometimes, you know, perhaps we're unpaid counsellors or kind counsellors to people in the nicest possible way, because, you know, we deal with lots of things as tattoo artists. And there's the negative side of it where customers don't turn up or you can never please them. But then there's the ones where you get friendships with the person, and there's the emotional times. I know from things that have happened in my life that I'm able to, when somebody comes in who's lost a person, I can be really empathetic with them and sit with them and talk with them. And, you know, it's what comes with age and with experience, you know. When I was 19, 20, I probably would never have been able to have done that. I wouldn't understand what it was, but from being in the business, I mean, I really appreciate what this business has given me, both, you know, and people say, oh, have you made loads of money? The financial side of it, I've got a real, you know, I've got a comfortable lifestyle, but it's more to do with other things that it offers you, friendships, experiences, you know, education, and that, and it will give you so much, but you have to give back to it. And I remember a friend of mine, another old-time tattooist, was talking about an old timer who pretty much lost everything, and he said he just kept plucking fruit from the tattoo tree without looking after that tree, and in the end it didn't bear him fruit anymore. And what he was saying was the guy suddenly became quite well known, was doing good, and all he did was go and spunk his money up, you know, live a wild lifestyle, and which meant he neglected his tattooing, and then in the end it was gone. So, you know, I still come to work 5 days a week, you know, and I will share knowledge with people or help people if I can, because people have done the same to me. So it's nice to be like that. And I think when you get older, you realise that you're not going to be around forever. And, you know, I've lost so many friends in tattooing, especially over the COVID years. And that, so what you can impart to people, if it, you know, I would only tell people things that are going to be a benefit to them, what I think would be a benefit. And it's like with my little apprentice, you know, I thought I would never take on an apprentice, you know, and then I looked at their work and met them and thought, you know what, before I get too old, maybe I'm going to try and get into this. And you know what, it's been so good because it's given me a new interest, because my little apprentice can really paint and draw and sing and bring fun and happiness, you know. We have a really good laugh with all the other people at the shop, and it's nice when somebody fits in there like that, no attitude. Yeah, it's become a fun place again, you know. I think with all of us who've got shops, we go through, when you work in close with people, sometimes there can be stresses and strains that happen, you know. My mum used to say to me, you spend more time with the people you work with than you do your partner. And if you think, you know, if you're doing 5 days a week, 8-hour day with them, 10-hour day, it's true really, you know. No wonder sometimes we get on each other's nerves.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important to document tattoo history, and yeah, it's nice to meet someone else that's, you know, been working towards that really.
Well, there are a lot of people, and now a lot of people are putting books together, because although the magazine industry and the book industry is suffering, you know, independently published books are just incredible. Rich Hardy's just done a book on Ben Cole. It's absolutely fantastic. Professor Nick York and Rake House Publications, they've just brought out some incredible books. One about a tattooist, Smith from South Africa, who learnt with Burchett, and I mean, I don't even know where these people find the stuff that's in there, but it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. It's a bit like when the National Maritime Museum in Falmouth did the big exhibition on British tattooing. They got, you know, Willie Robinson, he's got a museum now in Finland, but he's a big collector. Paul Ramsbottom, Scousy, but there was a guy called Neil Hopkins who was a relation of Jessie Knight, who's deemed to be Britain's first ever female tattoo artist. And there was just a great big box full of all her stuff that just told this whole history of Jessie's life. I mean, the Museum of Wales have bought it now to preserve it. I mean, when I was young, I got in touch with a Museum of Mankind that doesn't exist anymore, but it was an offshoot of the British Museum. And I went and met the curator from it. I've got all the letters I sent them, even with the British Museum, saying, please would you do an exhibition on tattooing, because one day the stuff that is being done now will be history. And I got some polite letters from them, but basically they were just saying, mate, you're having a laugh. And now look at it, museums are doing exhibitions, it's been seen for what it is. Tattooing is a very enduring art, and you know, it will carry on. There'll be those that are just into the art side of it, and there will be those that are into the history of it. But the interesting thing is, nowadays, if someone's doing a podcast in 50 years' time, what's being done now will be the history, won't it? Who knows where tattooing's going to go? It will never die out, but will its popularity wane? I've been saying for years the bubble will burst, and it's just got bigger and bigger. But is it feasible that it could? Or, as we see with this thing with Reach and the colour pigments, are there moves afoot to try and curtail it? And will it be driven underground again and become an underground art? You know? Which, if it does, the health authorities will never be able to control it. You know? So it's interesting times ahead. I mean, I probably won't be around in 20, 30 years' time to see that, but it will be interesting to see how tattooing is viewed then.